Hey, this is Chuck Gleichmann with another Flagler Sport Fishing Club quick tip. Today we're going to be talking about tides, currents, and wind effects on your trip. You need to consider the tide for two important reasons. The first one, obviously, is safety, and the second one is the access to your fish. Safety first, okay? You need to be making sure that you plan a safe trip for you and your crew. And if you're an offshore angler, guy or girl, and you plan to use Matanzas Inlet to get offshore, tide height is critical to either leaving or returning Matanzas Inlet. Matanzas Inlet can be extremely dangerous at low water, and you need to make sure that you pay attention to the tidal conditions there. So, if you're leaving from Matanzas and coming back to St. Augustine Inlet, you need to make sure that you plan fuel and plan time in your day to make sure that you have a successful trip. Safety inshore, make sure that you have enough water to get up on the flats and enough water to get back. There's nothing worse to end your day than being stuck way in the backcountry for 6 hours waiting for the tide to come in. Access to fish. Check with any of the Sharpies fishing the Matanzas Inlet Bridge, and they are the first ones to tell you that the best fishing is at dead low tide. You need to find out when dead low tide is. When you're in the backcountry, fishing the creeks, you need to make sure that you find moving water. So it's useless to be fishing any of the creeks when the water's not moving. Ultimately, the tide will determine where you fish and how you get to and fro safely. Okay, some quick tidbits and definitions. In a 24-hour period here, we have two highs and we have two lows, tidal events, okay? The definition in tidal range is the difference between the low and the high, okay? And the tidal range is significantly higher the closer you go to the inlet than further away. As an example, Matanzas Inlet has a tidal range of about 8 feet, where if you go back into the western end of Long Creek, the tidal range in Long Creek is closer to 1.5 to 2 feet. So keep in mind the fact that you've got a significantly different range to play with the closer that you go to the inlet. The same thing for the flow. You're going to get a lot more tidal flow closer to the inlet than way back into the backcountry. Okay, winds, as an example, west wind here has a tendency to hold water off the flats. So if you get a very, very brisk west wind and you think that you're going to get a full tide at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you very well might not get that full tide. It might be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches below that. Conversely, if you have an east wind blows water up onto the flats so that you'll get a higher high and a higher low, okay? Also, I guess the actual heights are really determined by the relationship between the sun, the moon, and the earth, which we're really not going to get into here. But there's some examples of some major differences during the year that you might want to take advantage of. Okay, we have significant negative tides. That's negative, that means low lows and low highs, okay, in December and January. It's a great time to go out and explore. And it's a great time to go find the holes, find the bumps, find the bars, find all the things that you can utilize in the coming year to catch fish. Okay, it's a great time to look for all the secret spots, okay? The other side of it, in August and September, we have extremely high tides, or high flood tides they call them, and the water is significantly higher so that the grass flats north of the 206 bridge, up towards Pellicer and in those areas, actually flood. And you can get up there with a flats boat and you can have some really, really great fishing for redfish in those areas, because as the tide goes up, the redfish get up into the grass to eat all the crustaceans and all the little things that they eat that they typically don't get an opportunity to eat because the tide is low. Great opportunities if you're a fly fisherman, okay? And finally, when you look at the tide chart, make sure that you look at the little numbers that are at the bottom of the day, and they will tell you, they're going to say a negative or a positive on it, and that's going to determine how much higher or how much lower the high tide or the low tide is going to be. So if you have a +1, it means that the tide levels are going to be about a foot higher than normal. If you have a -1, it's going to be about 1 foot lower than normal. So take those into consideration as far as your planning is concerned. So that being said, let's go take a look at the map. Okay, here's a highly detailed map of our local fishing area. Okay, and we're going to start to talk about how you calculate times to determine what high tide and low tide is based on where you're fishing or where you want to go fishing. Okay, and we are fortunate that we have a number of tide stations available to us in our area, and we have one tide station up here at the Matanzas A1A Bridge. All right, we have another tide station at Bing's Landing. We have a third tide station down at, it's called Smith Creek. It's over by the park south of the 100 Bridge. And then we have a fourth tide station down at the State Road 40 Bridge in Ormond Beach, tide station down there. Okay, so depending on what you use as a basis, and here we're using Matanzas Bridge as a basis. One of the unique things that we have here is that we are between two inlets, and they determine our tidal flow. So if I start at Matanzas Inlet and I have incoming tide that's going this way, and it's heading southbound on the ICW. So it splits. It goes, some go southbound on the ICW and some northbound towards St. Augustine. All right. The other inlet that determines our tides is Ponce Inlet, which is all the way down off the map. Okay, and incoming tide from Ponce is actually northbound as far as High Bridge. What happens is generally around High Bridge, the southbound incoming tide from Matanzas meets the northcoming inbound tide from Ponce. So that if you're north of High Bridge, you can be assured, and you're in the ICW and the current's going this way, that you've got an incoming current. And if you're south of High Bridge and you're in the ICW and you're floating up and you're drifting up this way, you can be assured that you're northbound with incoming current. So that's something you have to take into consideration, because many of our members fish this whole area down into Daytona. Okay, so easy enough to turn around if time zero is at the Matanzas Bridge and we're going from High Bridge north, okay, as 0, if in fact you want to know what time, and low tide is 8 o'clock in the morning, all right, if you go to Bing's Landing, you can very easily calculate, because you just have to take the difference between this tide station and that tide station, and you're going to find out that it's about 2 hours. So that if it's 8 o'clock here, low tide at Bing's is going to be 2 hours later. Okay, so it's going to be 10 o'clock. All right. Easy enough if you continue southbound on the ICW and you get down to Smith Creek, it's plus 4 hours. So it's going to take 4 hours for this to hit low tide. So if this was 8, so it's going to be more like 12 o'clock to be low tide at High Bridge, north of High Bridge. Okay. Same thing when you turn around and you start south, and when you start down at Ponce Inlet, and I don't have it written here, but High Bridge is about an hour and a half, plus an hour and a half from Ponce all the way up to High Bridge before you get your tidal change. Okay, so you have to add about an hour and a half. Now, easy enough to calculate. Okay, you can look at Smith Creek, you can tell there's 4 hours difference between that and that. You can look at Bing's, and it's easy from that to that, there's 2 hours. Okay, when you start moving west from the ICW, there are no tide stations out here. So you have to do your own calculations. And I've done some of them for you. And I very strongly suggest that you start keeping a log so you know what the tidal differences are. And you can also keep a log on how many fish you catch. Okay? If in fact that I'm moving along Porpoise Creek, okay, Porpoise Creek is about a 1 hour add to Matanzas Bridge. Okay, so if it's 8 o'clock here, it's 9 o'clock there, right? When we get down to Long Creek, you're now talking a difference of +3 or +4 hours from Matanzas. Now you can calculate it from Bing's, you can calculate it from any place you want, but this seemed to be the easiest for me to calculate it from, and I worked there. Palm Coast Canals, depending on where you are in the Palm Coast Canal, it's +4 for +5 hours from whatever Matanzas A1A bridge is. Okay, and I suggest to our members that live on the Palm Coast Canals to figure out where they are basically and what section that. Take an adult cocktail, go sit on the dock one afternoon and sit there and watch them when the tide stops. Look at your watch, and then you can make a comparison and a calculation. Okay. The same thing happens when we're talking about west of the ICW when we get below High Bridge. Okay, that is what's called the Toilet Bowl, Tomoka Basin, in south down into Daytona. Now we're only going to the State Road 40 bridge in this discussion, but I can tell you one of the interesting things of why they have the toilet bowl down here is that if you've ever fished there, you go in and it splits and there's this big open space in the middle, and what happens is that the tidal flow splits and there's a lot more water here than there is here. So you actually can get a situation where the north section will get an incoming tide and the south section will get an outgoing tide, which creates the toilet bowl effect, the flushing effect here, and that's how it got its name. So this is a pretty unique situation. So if you fish in the northern berm, you can take the Halifax State Road 40 number and you add 2 hours. And if you fish in the southern part of the berm, it's closer to 3 hours. Okay. Get down in the Tomoka Basin, it's anywhere from about 45 minutes to an hour and a half when you get up into the mosquito control canals. So that gives you a really, really quick idea of how you can calculate, the various tidal positions where you want to fish. So hopefully that will give you enough to get started. There's a lot more to it than this. Keep in mind the fact the wind's got something to do with it. The time of year has something to do with it. This is a real key to catching fish. Be safe out there, tight lines. Okay, now that we talked about all this stuff, where do I find the information? There's plenty of great apps out there. I use My Tides, Tides for fishing, as far as the apps are concerned. Another one that's just very, very simple, that's easy, is Tides itself. We have the tide charts on the club's website, so you can look for it there as well. You can, if you get Florida Sportsman, they have it on the back of Florida Sportsman every month. So all that stuff is available to you, easy to get, use it, and you'll be safe out there.